My 9-year-old adopted grandson was left alone for 6 days while my daughter took her bio twins to Disney. A stranger called me at midnight. He's been on this bench since 6 p.m. I booked 2 tickets to Alaska and called a lawyer. Some men spend 31 years running into burning buildings and figure they have already met the worst thing they're ever going to meet. I retired at 62 believing that. Then a stranger called me at midnight about a bench outside a shopping center, and I found out the worst thing doesn't smell like smoke at all. Friday night, I was asleep in my chair with a ball game finishing up on the television and a plate of cold meatloaf on the side table, which is what a 68-year-old widower's Friday looks like when he's done pretending otherwise. My phone lit up on the arm of the chair. Unknown number, local prefix. I almost let it ring out. I want you to understand how close I came to letting it ring out. Is this Mr. Kearney? It is. Sir, my name's Terry Odom. I'm the security guard over at the shopping plaza on Baxter by the elementary school. I'm sorry to call so late. There's a boy out here on the bench. He's been here since we locked the doors at 6. I sat forward so fast the plate went off the table. 9 years old, dark hair, blue backpack with a little brass compass hanging off the zipper. That's him. That's exactly him. 6 o'clock to 11:52. Almost 6 hours on a metal bench in the cold, in the dark, with nobody coming. Put him on the phone, Mr. Odom, and don't hang up. I'm 4 minutes out. There was a shuffle, a scrape, and then the smallest voice I have ever heard come out of a telephone. Grandpa? Hey, buddy. I'm coming right now. Are you cold? A little bit. A pause. I'm okay, though. I've got my jacket. He didn't have a jacket. I'd bought him that jacket myself the previous November. Blue with a hood lined in flannel, and I would find out later it had been packed into a donation bag back in June. Diego, listen to me. Sit right there with Mr. Odom, and don't move for anybody else. Grandpa's headlights are going to come around that corner before you can count to 200. Quiet on the line. Then, is Mom mad at me? I stood in my kitchen in the dark with my keys already in my hand and my heart going like a fist against a door. Why would you ask me that, son? Because they left on Sunday and I think I did something. I've been going to camp and coming home like I'm supposed to. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't want to get anybody in trouble. Sunday. It was Friday night. He had said Sunday. I don't remember putting my shoes on. I remember the drive, and I remember taking the corner onto Baxter and seeing that boy stand up off the bench under a security light. And I remember Terry Odom, a man maybe 70 years old with his own coat draped over a child who wasn't his, and a look on his face that told me he'd already decided he wasn't leaving until somebody worthy showed up. Diego didn't say a word. He just walked into me and held on, and I picked him up, all 61 pounds of a kid who should have weighed more, and stood there in a parking lot at midnight holding my grandson, while a stranger looked away to give us the dignity of it. I called both numbers on the emergency card. Mother's phone goes straight to a recording, Terry said quietly. Father's too. Camp season ended today. Nobody came at pickup. Nobody came at close. He shifted his weight. Mr. Kearney, there's something you should know. That child told me he's been sleeping at his house alone. He told me the code to his own front door. I looked at him over Diego's shoulder. Would you be willing to write that down? Everything you saw, everything he said, with times on it. Terry Odom didn't even blink. I'll have it to you by morning. And then, nodding at the boy, I hope somebody answers for this. They would. I just didn't tell him that yet. I buckled Diego in, and myself, and he fell asleep before I got out of the lot. His head lolled against the window, and one hand stayed curled around the little compass clipped to his backpack strap, the one I'd given him the day the adoption went final, when he was 4 years old and had already lived in 3 houses that weren't his. I told him then, a compass means you always know which way home is. He'd held onto it like it was load-bearing ever since. I got him home to my place on Chestnut and put him in the spare room that had been his mother's room once, back when she was somebody I understood. I sat on the edge of that bed until his breathing evened out, watching a 9-year-old sleep like it was the only job left in the world worth doing. Then I went to the kitchen, put on a pot of coffee I had no business drinking at that hour, and I sat down at the table with a legal pad, because 31 years on an engine company teaches you one thing above everything else. When the building's on fire, you don't stand there feeling things. You get the people out, and you write down what happened while it's still fresh, because a fire report written the next week is worth nothing next to one written the same night. Sunday, September the 7th, departure, Friday, September the 12th, 11:52 p.m. The phone call. I wrote down the name of the camp, the name of the guard, the number on the emergency card, and underneath all of it, in my own handwriting, the sentence Diego had said to me on the phone, word for word, before I let myself forget the exact shape of it. I wasn't writing because I was angry. Anger's loud, and it burns out fast, and I've watched it take down more houses than bad wiring ever did. I was writing because I already knew, sitting there at that table at 1 in the morning, that whatever came next was going to need a record, and records don't lie, even when everybody around them starts to. At the light on Oak and 19th, I did the thing I'd been telling myself not to do since Terry said the word Sunday. I opened my daughter's page on my phone. Posted that afternoon at 4:31. My daughter Sabrina in sunglasses, her husband Grant with his arm around her, and my 6-year-old grandbabies Cole and Piper in matching shirts in front of that castle everybody knows, holding oversized ice creams shaped like a mouse's head. Caption, our whole world, all 4 of us, best 12 days of our lives. 4. I read that word maybe 9 times sitting at a green light with nobody behind me and my grandson asleep in the back seat. 4, not 5. She'd counted her family out loud in front of everybody she'd ever known, and she'd come up 4. Friend? I have been in rooms that were on fire. I have never in my life been as cold as I was at that intersection. I got Diego home and settled, and by the time his breathing leveled out, I had already decided the shape of the next several hours. I wasn't going to sleep. I sat in the kitchen with my legal pad, and at 2:40 in the morning, I searched 3 words into my phone. Attorney, child, Bozeman. The second name that came up was Marisol Vega. Vega, family law, Main Street, 19 years. Under her photo, one line stopped me cold. Former staff attorney, Montana Department of Child and Family Services. A woman who used to be the one filing the reports. I sent an email at 2:51 in the morning. I told her who I was, retired fire captain, 68 years old, and that my 9-year-old grandson had been left without adult supervision for 6 days while his parents took his siblings to Florida. I told her he'd been found outside a closed building, alone in the cold. I told her I had a written eyewitness statement coming and a timeline already built. I told her I wasn't looking for an apology. Then I opened another tab and I bought 2 tickets to Anchorage, Alaska. Here's why Alaska, because I imagine you're wondering. That boy has a paper map of the United States taped above his bed. Not a poster, an actual folded road map he found in my garage in a box of my late wife Ruth's things the summer after we got him, and he asked if he could keep it, and I said, sure buddy, take it. He colors in a state every time he's actually stood in it. In 5 years, he had colored in exactly one. Montana. He'd lie on his stomach on my living room rug for an hour at a stretch, not coloring, just looking at all that blank space he hadn't gotten to yet. At 3:20 in the morning, I called my daughter. I knew she wouldn't pick up. I didn't want her to pick up. I wanted her to roll over in a resort bed in Florida the next morning, reach for her phone out of habit, and find her father's voice sitting there waiting for her like a letter from a lawyer. The beep came. I kept it warm. I kept it easy. I have made 10,000 calm transmissions on a radio with a roof coming down, and this was no different. Hey, sweetheart, it's Dad. Just letting you know I've got Diego with me. Picked him up tonight. He's fine. He's asleep. Turns out he's been on his own a while. Don't cut your trip short on my account. He and I are going to take a little trip of our own. We'll talk when you're home. I hung up. I checked on him one more time before I went back to the kitchen. He'd rolled onto his side, and his forehead was smooth, which I hadn't seen on him in longer than I wanted to admit. I sat back down with my coffee gone cold and looked at a map of Alaska on my laptop screen, and I thought about how I now had a written statement coming, an attorney with the state's own playbook, 2 plane tickets, and a daughter who had absolutely no idea what was waiting for her. Saturday morning, 7:10. Diego came into the kitchen in his socks, hair standing straight up on one side, compass still in his fist. Grandpa, why are you dressed like that? Because a man wears a real shirt when he's flying. He blinked at me. Flying where? Alaska. He looked at me the way a kid looks at you when he's been disappointed enough times to check the exits first. He didn't jump. He didn't yell. He said very carefully, for real Alaska? Or pretend Alaska? That right there. That's the sentence I'll be hearing when they put me in the ground. For real Alaska, I said. You and me. Wheels up at 11. He ran. He ran down the hall so hard he took the runner rug with him, and 40 seconds later he came back with the map, breathing like he'd sprinted a mile, holding it up with both hands. Can I bring this so I can color it right when we land? Son, I said, you can color it on the plane. I am a man who thinks a nice restaurant is one where the menu is laminated. I drive a 22-year-old pickup on purpose, because a man who's put out 100 house fires knows exactly how little of what burns is worth replacing with something fancier. When the woman at the lodge desk in Seward handed me the key to a room facing Resurrection Bay with a wall of glass and a stack of towels folded like origami, I very nearly asked if there'd been a mistake. Diego walked in behind me, stopped 4 feet inside the door, and did not move. Out that window, black water and mountains coming straight down into it, and fog sitting on the ridgeline like it was tired of holding itself up. Grandpa, barely a whisper. Is this ours? For 6 days it is. The whole window? The whole window. He set the map on the bed, took the pencil out of his pocket, and colored in Alaska, right there standing up, pressing so hard the paper dimpled under his hand. Then he looked at the 2 colored-in states, and he looked at the other 48, and he said to himself more than me, okay. Day 1, we took a boat out into the fjords. He asked the naturalist 11 questions in 40 minutes, and I know it was 11 because I counted everyone on my fingers behind my back like a man counting sit-ups. Then a humpback came up 60 yards off the port rail and blew, and the whole deck yelled, and Diego grabbed a fistful of my coat and didn't let go until she went down again. Grandpa, he said, and his voice had gone strange. She's the biggest thing I ever saw, and she came up right where we were. She sure did. Why? Because she wanted to see who showed up. He didn't say anything to that. He just kept his hand in my coat pocket the rest of the ride back to the harbor, which is a thing I noticed and didn't mention, because some moments a man just lets stand. Day 2, a charter captain named Ike Halloran, 60 years old, hands like catcher's mitts, no small talk in him at all, put a rod in Diego's hands and said, you bring it in, you clean it. That's the deal. Diego fought a halibut for 9 minutes and made a sound at the end of it I had never heard him make before, something between a laugh and a shout that didn't have a name yet. He cleaned that fish too, standing at the gutting table with his tongue between his teeth in concentration, flour of fish scales all up his forearms. Ike stood over him the whole time saying, slower, slower, there you go, that's a fisherman, and I stood at the rail with my back to them both and had to look at the water for a minute because a boy who'd been sleeping alone with a spare key under a mat 9 days earlier, was standing there being called a fisherman by a man who meant it. Day 3, the lodge cook. Her name was Bertie Halverson. She'd been in that kitchen 26 years, and she took one look at Diego hanging around the pass at breakfast and put an apron on him before he could ask. She taught him sourdough pancakes with a starter she said was older than both of us combined, which I doubted but didn't say. Flour everywhere. On him, on her, somehow on me, though I never got closer than the doorway. You keep him, Bertie told me, dead serious, wiping her hands on her apron. This one listens. I said I intended to, but here's the part nobody in that lodge saw. Every night, once Diego was asleep, I took my phone out onto the little deck off our room, slid the glass door shut behind me, sat down in the cold with the water black and moving in front of me, and called Marisol Vega, 9 o'clock sharp every night, 10 o'clock her time, and she picked up on the first ring every single time. Marisol Vega did not do pleasantries. I asked her once how her weekend was, and she said, productive. Tell me about the school records. And that was the whole exchange. And somehow it was exactly what I needed. Night 1, she said, Mr. Kearney, I want to be direct with you because I think you can handle direct, and I'd prefer it that way. What you've described isn't a bad decision. In Montana, it has a statutory definition. Leaving a child under the age of 12 without adequate supervision for a period of days is neglect. Not a gray area. Not a judgment call. I gripped the rail. What do we do with it? 3 things at once. 1, I file the report, not hold it, file it. 2, I file an emergency petition for temporary guardianship ex parte, which means we can be in front of a judge before your daughter's plane lands. 3, I subpoena the school. If there's a counselor's note in that boy's file, I want it. There is one, I said. Last February, his teacher called me. I called my daughter about it, and she told me to stay in my lane. Silence for a second on her end. Then, write down the date of that phone call and anything you can remember about it before you go to bed tonight. I did. I still have that page. The ink's a little smudged from the sea air, but every word's still legible. Night 2 on that deck, Marisol walked me through the money. You're going to want to change your will, she said. Everyone does, in your position. I'm going to walk you through how to do it so it can't be undone. And then I'll show you how to structure it so it doesn't ruin him. I'm listening. An irrevocable trust. Once it's executed, it's outside your estate and outside anyone's reach. Not your daughter's, not her husband's, not any attorney they retain, not a probate challenge, not a claim of undue influence. It's finished. A pause. But you will not release the whole thing to a child on his 18th birthday. I have watched that go wrong more times than I can count. Education and housing at 18, administered by an independent trustee. The remainder at 25, and you name a successor trustee and a successor guardian now, in writing, both of them younger than you. Why both? Because opposing counsel's first move against a 68-year-old petitioner is your age, and I intend to have that answered before they finish the sentence. I thought about it for about 4 seconds. My niece Nadia, 41, ICU nurse in Missoula, married, 2 kids of her own, and she had loved that boy since the day we got him. Get me her number tonight, I said. I'll text it over before I sleep. Night 3, the glass door slid open behind me before I'd even finished dialing. Diego, in his pajamas, squinting against the porch light. Grandpa, who are you talking to at nighttime? I covered the phone. Just some grown-up business, bud. Go on back to bed. He considered this with the enormous solemnity of a boy who suspects he's being handled. Then can I have hot chocolate from the lobby machine? It's 9 o'clock at night. It's Alaska, though. I want the record to show that I am on a deck in Seward with a former state child welfare attorney on the line, building a case against my own daughter, and I am being negotiated with over cocoa. 1 cup, then bed. He vanished. I put the phone back to my ear and apologized. Don't, Marisol said, and for half a second, something almost human came through that lawyer voice. How is he doing? He laughed at breakfast until he got the hiccups. Good. Hold on to that and start writing it down too. The contrast between his documented decline over the past 18 months and how he is right now in your care. That's going to matter more to a judge than anything I could argue in a courtroom. I wrote it on the back of a receipt from the fishing charter. I still have it. It was night 4 I wasn't ready for. We were at dinner at a place on the harbor. Paper on the tables, a window full of masts. Diego was working through fish and chips and giving me a full scouting report on every French fry individually. This one's too crispy. This one's perfect. This one fell in the tartar sauce and doesn't count anymore. And then he stopped, put the fork down, looked at the table. Grandpa, can I ask you something? And you won't be mad. You can always ask me anything. He kept looking at the table. Is it because I'm not really theirs? The restaurant kept going. Somebody laughed at the bar. A server called out a table number. And at our table, everything just stopped. I set my fork down. I reached across and took both of his hands in mine. And those hands were so small, friend. They were so small. And I told him the truth. All of it. Carefully. At the size a 9-year-old can carry. I told him what adoption is and what it is not. I told him a family isn't a thing you're issued at birth. It's a thing people choose out loud, on paper, in front of a judge, with their whole name signed at the bottom. And that somebody choosing you is not the runner-up prize. It's the entire event. I told him that whatever was broken in that house was broken before he ever walked into it. And that a 9-year-old cannot be the reason grown adults behave badly. I told him I had spent 31 years going into buildings to get people out. And that there was not one thing on this earth or in the state of Montana that was going to keep me from getting him out. His eyes went shiny. He nodded slow, working through every piece of it the way he does. Then he sniffed and said, "Can I have your coleslaw? You can have anything on this table. And can Can we get the pie? 2 pies. He smiled, small first, then wider, and then the real one. The one that gets all the way up into his eyes and stays there. I excused myself, walked back to the restroom, ran cold water over my wrists, and looked at myself in that mirror for a long minute. Because I had been steady at that table, and he'd needed steady, so steady is what he got. But I'm a man, not a monument, and 2,000 miles south of me, my daughter, my only child, the one I taught to drive on a gravel road outside Belgrade, the one I walked down an aisle 11 years ago and cried the whole way through, was sleeping fine. That was the thought that dried my hands. I went back out, sat down across from him, and I quit weighing it. No more second guessing. No more she's my kid too. We were going home, and Marisol Vega had work to do. We flew home 9 days after that midnight phone call. Diego slept most of the flight with the map folded on his chest. Alaska and Montana colored in now. 47 states still blank and waiting. I watched Montana come up out of the clouds below us. Brown hills going gold at the edges. The kind of ordinary I'd stopped noticing until I'd spent a week looking at something else entirely, and I thought about what was waiting for us on the ground. Sabrina's family had landed 2 days before we did. She'd sent me exactly one message the whole time we were gone. 8 words, no punctuation. Got your voicemail. We should talk in person. I forwarded it to Marisol with one line of my own. Wednesday, my house, 9 a.m. She replied in 3 minutes. I'll be there at 8:59 with everything. She was. Charcoal suit, flat shoes, a briefcase with the corners worn off it from 19 years of exactly this kind of morning. She set 2 folders on my dining table, took her coffee without ceremony, and sat down like she'd been sitting at that table her whole career. They don't know I'm here, she said, not looking up from the folders. They think it's family talk. The corner of her mouth moved about a 1/16 of an inch. It is. It's just going to be a well-documented one. At 9:04, I heard the car in the driveway. Diego was at school. I'd made certain of that the night before. Dropped him off myself. Watched him walk in the front doors with his backpack and his compass, and no idea what his grandfather had planned for the morning. Grant came in first. My son-in-law, 41, tanned from 12 days in Florida sun, wearing a collared shirt like a man who'd dressed for a meeting. Sabrina came in behind him with her chin up and her arms already crossed, loaded for an argument she'd spent the whole drive building. You could see it sitting on her shoulders. Then Grant saw the woman at my table and stopped walking like somebody had pulled his plug. Dad! Sabrina's voice went thin. Who is this? Sabrina. Grant. This is Marisol Vega. Family law, 19 years. And before that, she spent 6 years working for the state on cases exactly like this one. I gestured at the chairs. Sit down. There's coffee. Sabrina didn't sit. This is unbelievable. You called a lawyer on your own daughter. Marisol didn't raise her voice 1 decibel. Please, sit down. She sat. Marisol opened the first folder and slid a single sheet across the table, the way you'd pass somebody the sugar. No speech, no build-up. Sunday, September the 7th, 6:15 a.m. Vehicle departs residence. 4 occupants, per the neighbor's doorbell camera on the opposite side of the cul-de-sac. September the 7th through the 12th. Minor child, Diego Kearney Whitfield, age 9, present at the residence with no adult supervision. Child self-transported to and from day camp. Child reports consuming cereal, crackers, and half of each camp-provided lunch saved for the evening meal. She turned the page without looking up. Friday, September the 12th, 6 p.m. Day camp season concludes. No authorized adult arrives for pickup. Friday, September the 12th, 11:52 p.m. Child located outdoors, unsupervised, by facility custodian Terry Odom. Signed statement attached. Friday, September the 12th, 11:56 p.m. Child retrieved by maternal grandfather Walter Kearney. Attachment C, social media post timestamp September the 12th, 4:31 p.m., placing both parents in Orange County, Florida. Grant's face didn't move. Sabrina's face did nothing but move. This is you twisting, she started. We had arrangements, Dad. Grant's cousin was supposed to. Miss Praywit, Marisol said, asked about that on Monday. She states she was asked in a group text on August the 30th, never confirmed, and was in Idaho the entire week. She's provided that text thread voluntarily. She slid a second sheet across. Sabrina's mouth closed. I'm going to save everyone some time, Marisol went on, her tone never once rising above pleasant, which somehow made it land harder. We are not here to establish whether it happened. It happened. We are here so you understand what has already been done. Already? Grant finally found his voice. On Tuesday the 16th, Marisol said, as if he hadn't spoken, I filed a report with the Department of Children and Family Services. It is not sealed. It is not pending my discretion. It is filed, and as of Monday, it carries a substantiated finding. You can't just... Grant started again. On Wednesday the 17th, I appeared before Judge Ellery Hoskins on an emergency ex parte petition. Mr. Kearney was granted temporary guardianship of Diego that afternoon. It has been in effect for 8 days. The full hearing is October the 9th. You will both be served this afternoon. I'd rather you heard it here first. The room went quiet in a way that had actual weight to it. You could feel it sitting on the furniture. He's 68, Sabrina said, and her voice cracked on it. He can't. 68, cleared by a full physical on September the 22nd. 31 years of public service. No record, homeowner, no debt. Marisol laid down one more page, and with a named successor guardian, Nadia Corliss, 41, registered nurse, Missoula, already consented in writing and already background checked, that boy will not be placed again, ever. I built this specifically so nobody could ever ask that question twice. That's when my daughter looked at me for the first time since she came through my door. Her eyes were red. She'd been fighting it since the driveway, I realized. That chin held up hadn't been defiance. It had been the only thing keeping her face from doing what it was about to do now. Dad. Just that. One word carrying 6 days and 18 months and 11 years all at once. I gave her nothing. I let her carry it herself the rest of the way. Grant found his voice again, though it came out smaller than it had at the door. This is punitive. You're punishing us. No, son, I said, and I meant son, the way you'd mean it for a man who'd married into something he never bothered to understand. Punitive would have been what I wanted to do at midnight on the 12th, standing in that parking lot. This is just accurate. Marisol didn't look up from her folder. I'll lay out the terms going into the October hearing, and I'd encourage you both to listen rather than respond, because none of this is up for negotiation this morning. Diego stays with Mr. Kearney. Weekly sessions with a licensed child therapist, paid through the trust. Supervised visitation for Sabrina, 1 hour weekly, at a facility, contingent on completed parenting and family counseling with documented attendance. For Grant, no contact, pending evaluation. Grant's chair scraped back an inch. You can't decide that. A judge decides that. A judge already has, Marisol said. I'll tell you the reason plain since you're asking. In 11 years, you never once signed a card. Dad, not a birthday card, not a Christmas card. The school file had it in writing. A counselor's note from February, flagging Diego's withdrawal at school, low mood, some concerning language about not mattering. That note was sent home. It was received and acknowledged in writing by both of you. She turned a page. And never acted on. You signed the acknowledgement at 10:41 in the morning on February the 9th. I have the signature. Sabrina flinched like she'd been struck. Grant stood up. He didn't say anything else. He walked toward the door, and at the threshold he stopped, and for a second I thought he might turn around and say something worth remembering. Some late flicker of a man realizing what he'd let happen under his own roof. He didn't. He just kept walking, and the door swung shut behind him without slamming, which somehow felt worse than if it had. Sabrina didn't follow him. She sat there at my dining table, the same table she'd eaten breakfast at every morning of her childhood, the same table where I'd helped her with long division and later college applications, and later still, wedding seating charts. And she looked like a woman watching every version of herself she'd ever tried to be collapse into the one sitting in that chair. He's 68, she said again, quieter this time, like she was testing whether the sentence still had any weight to it. You can't raise a 9-year-old at 68. I raised you, I said. I buried your mother and kept raising you. I don't know what age has to do with love, Sabrina. I've never seen the two of them in the same room. She looked down at her hands. I know you think this is simple. I don't think anything about this is simple. I think 6 days is simple. I think a caption that says 4 when there's 5 of you is simple. Everything after that, I'll grant you, gets complicated fast. But I didn't make it complicated. You did, 6 days at a time, starting back in February when a teacher tried to tell you something and you told her to mind her business. I didn't tell her to mind her business, she shot back, an edge coming into her voice now, something closer to the daughter I remembered arguing with at 17. I told her Diego was fine. Kids go through phases. Withdrawal isn't a phase, sweetheart. It's a symptom, and you had somebody trained to notice it standing right in front of you, and you sent her home with a form. Marisol let that sit for a moment before she spoke again, her voice returning to its flat, procedural register, the sound of a woman who'd delivered this particular kind of silence to 100 different dining tables over 19 years and knew exactly how long to let it breathe. There's one more item, she said, and then I'll leave the two of you to talk if that's what you'd like. Mr. Kearney has executed an irrevocable trust. I'll let him walk you through the specifics himself, since it's his estate and his decision, but I'll tell you the legal shape of it so there's no confusion later. It cannot be contested. It cannot be undone. It is not influenced by anything said in this room today, tomorrow, or at any point going forward, because it was signed and notarized 8 days ago, before this conversation ever happened. She closed her briefcase with a soft click, gathered the folders, and stood. I'll see myself out, she said. Mr. Kearney, call me after. Sabrina. And here, for the first time all morning, something almost gentle came into her voice, though it never stopped being precise. The visitation schedule starts Thursday. I'd encourage you to be there early. Judges notice punctuality, and so do children. She left. The house went quiet in the particular way a house goes quiet after somebody's delivered news that rearranges the furniture without anybody having to move a single physical thing. Sabrina sat there for a long time. Long enough that the coffee Marisol hadn't finished went cold in its cup, a little skin forming on the surface the way it does. I didn't fill the silence. 31 years of standing in doorways waiting for a fire to tell you what it was going to do next teaches you that silence isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it's the only room a person has left to think in. Can I see him? She asked finally. Before the hearing. I'm not asking to take him anywhere. I just want to see him. He's at school until 3. She nodded at that like it was information she'd file away and use exactly correctly. And just for a moment I saw the girl I'd raised in there. Careful, precise, always doing her homework a day early because she hated the feeling of being unprepared for anything. I wondered when that carefulness had curdled into the kind of person who could watch her own son sleep alone for 6 nights and call it an arrangement. Dad. She said it again, differently this time. Not an accusation. Not even really a question. Just my name, like she was checking whether it still belonged to her the way it used to. I looked at her. I let myself, for just a moment, remember teaching her to drive on that gravel road outside Belgrade, her hands white-knuckled on the wheel at 10 miles an hour. Me telling her, you've got this, and meaning it with my whole chest. I'm listening, I said, but I need you to actually talk now, Sabrina. Not explain, not manage me. Talk. She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her own hands like she was reading something written there that only she could see. Then she started to talk. I knew, she said. Her voice came apart in the middle of the second word, like the sentence itself was too heavy to say in one piece. I knew the whole time, Dad. I knew before we ever pulled out of the driveway. I didn't move. I didn't reach for her hand, though every instinct I had told me to. I'd learned enough in 31 years of pulling people out of collapsed rooms to know that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone finish getting themselves out on their own power, because a rescue that isn't earned doesn't hold the same way in a person's memory. Grant said it was one trip, she said, that Diego doesn't even like crowds, that he gets overwhelmed in lines, that we do something special with just him after, once the twins were older and it wouldn't feel so lopsided, I guess is the word he used. And I told myself that was true because it was easier than the alternative. What was the alternative? That I'd stopped seeing him as fully mine. She said it flat, like a fact she'd already turned over so many times in her own head that it had lost the power to surprise her, even as it was clearly costing her everything to say it out loud. Not in a way I'd have ever said out loud, not even to myself, not until right now. But somewhere in the last 2 years, I started thinking of Cole and Piper as my kids, the ones who came from me, and Diego as the one we adopted. Like there was a version of family with an asterisk on it, and he was the asterisk. Her hands were shaking now. She pressed them flat against the table like she could hold them still by force. I packed my bag on Saturday night, and I walked past his door, and he was sitting on his bed with that map spread out, tracing the outline of Florida with his finger, and he asked me what state we were going to, and I said Florida, and he said, "Can I come next time?" Like he already knew the answer, like he was just checking to see if I'd say it out loud. She stopped. Her jaw worked, fighting something back that lost the fight a second later. I said, "See you soon, bud," and I picked up my suitcase and I closed the front door behind me, and I didn't look back at the window because I knew if I looked back and saw him standing there, I wouldn't have been able to get in the car. I wanted to be furious. I was furious. It was sitting right there under my ribs, hot and old and completely justified. But underneath the fury, older than it, quieter than it, was something else entirely. Grief. Clean, plain grief. For a girl I had raised to know better, and a woman sitting across from me now who I genuinely did not recognize. I let myself hold both of those things for about 3 seconds. Then I set them down, because there was still work left to do, and grief has never once put a fire out. I know you knew, Sabrina, I said. That's the part I can't get past. Not the trip. Not even the 6 days, though God knows that's enough on its own. It's that you knew. And you got in the car anyway. And you spent 12 days at a theme park with a smile on your face in every photograph, while your son ate crackers for dinner and let himself in with a spare key and told a stranger on a bench that he didn't want to get anybody in trouble. She flinched like I'd reached across the table and touched her. He said that? Her voice had gone very small. He said he didn't want to get anybody in trouble? Those were close to his exact words. He was more worried about protecting all of you than he was about himself. 9 years old, alone for 6 days, and his first instinct on a bench in the cold at midnight was to keep everybody else out of trouble. She put her hand over her mouth. I watched something break open behind her eyes. Not performance, I don't think. Not the kind of tears a person produces because they know they're supposed to. Something further down than that. Something that had probably been cracking for a lot longer than 6 days, and had just now finally given all the way out. I don't know how to fix this, she said from behind her hand. You don't, I said. Not today. Maybe not for a long time. Fixing isn't today's job. Today's job was you telling me the truth, which you just did, and that matters more than you think it does right now, even though it doesn't feel like it changes anything. Does it change anything? I thought about that honestly before I answered, because she deserved an honest answer more than she deserved a comfortable one. It changes what kind of relationship we're going to be able to have going forward, I said. It doesn't change the hearing. It doesn't change the trust. Those were already decided before you sat down at this table, but it changes whether I think there's a version of you worth waiting for on the other side of all this. And for what it's worth, I think there is. I just think you've got a long way to walk to get there, and nobody's going to carry you. I slid my own folder across the table. The house on Chestnut. The 80 acres outside Livingston that my father left me and his father left him. All of it, as of 8 days ago, sitting in an irrevocable trust for Diego. Education and housing released at 18 through an independent trustee. The balance at 25. Not revocable, not contestable, not touchable by any attorney either of you could ever afford to hire. None of this is yours to carry, I said, but I'm going to be very clear for the rest of my life about who was left on a bench. Last week I found him on the living room rug, on his stomach, tracing a small line in ink out from Seward into the water, and a little shape at the end of it. What's that, bud? That's where the whale came up, he said, without looking away from it, so I don't forget where it was.